Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the sixth installment of the Learning Engineering Speaker Series, where we bring together leaders and practitioners who are shaping how learning is designed, delivered, and sustained in complex operational environments. I am Stephen Spencer, the leader of C-ADL's multimedia team, and monitoring our questions and chat will be Major Stevens. And today, we are pleased to welcome Brad White, who currently serves as Training Program Manager and River Class Training Manager at Fleetway Incorporated. Brad has nearly 30 years of experience in uniform. Throughout his career, he's held two command positions, deployed at sea as a naval warfare officer and on the ground as a training development officer. In his current role, Brad leads a multidisciplinary team of instructional designers, developers, data analysts, project coordinators, and former sailors, all working towards a shared goal of supporting a more capable Royal Canadian Navy through new ships and better trained crews. Brad holds degrees from the Royal Military College of Canada, Mount St. Vincent University, and the University of New Brunswick, underscoring a career defined by continuous learning and professional growth. And we are thrilled to have Brad with us today and look forward to the insights he'll be share on leadership training development and learning at scale in high stakes environments. And Brad would like this to be something of a conversation, so please put your questions and comments in the chat as we go along. And Major Stevens will pass them on or ask you to join us on your microphone. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Brad White. Oh, you are
You're
muted.
muted.
Brad.
That's always the best way to start a presentation, muted. I think folks like Regan Lagasse love it when I start muted and continue that way during my speeches. Anyway, I see Chris online. I see a whole bunch of folks, names that I recognize, and a whole bunch of names I don't recognize. So I'm really happy to be here today. I have about an hour. Got a kind of hard stop at my 1300 your 12 noon. You can all go to lunch and I'll get on with it. So share my screen. So I wrote this presentation on Fleetway time. So I'm going to put the Fleetway banner up here, but you'll notice at the bottom of the screen, it says this presentation is for informational and educational purposes. The views expressed are solely my own and do not necessarily reflect those of my employer. That is because I designed this presentation so you have some things to take away. Okay, so there's some charts in here that don't have a lot of pictures on them. They have a lot of words, but I would like people to be able to refer to this afterwards, and you can use those charts and that information to kind of form your own plan if you want to, or you can use that information to ask me questions either privately. I put my work email and my personal email. By the way, I prefer to use my work email, but you can use my personal email. I want you to use this. So it's not flashy. It's not one of these presentations that has lots of cool animations and stuff like that. It just has information, and I want to talk to you. So please ask questions throughout. And, add your own experience too. There's lots of experienced faces and voices on this call. So if you have something you want to reflect on, then let me know and we can chat about it. What is Fleetway? These are all the things we do. We are a J.D. Irving company, so we're an affiliate to Irving Shipbuilding. But that doesn't mean we do work exclusively for Irving Shipbuilding. We actually work with Davy and C-SPAN, but almost entirely in the maritime world. What is Fleetway again? We are across the country. We actually have folks all over the country, even folks who work not in offices in places like Toronto and others. And we worked on frigates. We are the Halifax class design agent, so we do a lot of work as an agent of the Crown there. And the other side of Fleetway is actually a provider of services, not an agent of the Crown for repairs. And as you can see at the bottom of the screen, this is an earlier rendition, unclassified of a Type 26 3D model. And we will be doing all of the River class platform training. We do all the crew work, and we work very closely with CAE and Lockheed Martin Canada, who are doing the Canadian combat system training and navigation suite training, as well as our American counterparts who do the Aegis part of the combat training suite. So lots of very fun and interesting work there. So I told you kind of in the I don't know, the little précis, the summary that we were going to talk about the fact that that old model of putting training together is gone. It's dead. I'm going to give you some ideas about transforming your team, optimal workforce design. I stole some language from learning engineering. We're going to talk about human centeredness and data informed decision making. I'm not actually going to mention those terms again, but I think when we go through the charts and the information, you're going to see where the human element of what we do is definitely front and center, and also data and tools. And I want to talk about some other lessons I've learned, and they can be good lessons, and sometimes they can be some errors that we made along the way. It's an honest, frank discussion. I will say that sometimes I've mentioned some companies or some software that we do have Fleetway has relationships with. I want to point out that I'm not trying to sell those products. This is not what this is about. This is not about selling those products. If I mention that, or if I mention Fleetway, it's because I worked for Fleetway, and if I mention another company, it doesn't necessarily mean that I condone that particular product over another. In some cases, I'll talk about specifics, but I'm going to talk about the problem space and a recap of the last presentation. It's going to be the first part, and then I'm going to get into this pattern of trying to define what the problem is, some observations I made, some solutions I made, and then some adjustments. So you're going to see a bunch of slides that kind of have a process in them, and I'll go through that too. So the previous presentation ended on this slide. It's going to come up again in a few slides. So basically, if you were present during a presentation I made a few months ago to a slightly different audience, I talked about the problem space, talked about engineering disciplines, I talked about full spectrum expertise, and overarching requirements. All those drivers that kind of get translated into us responding to those drivers on the right-hand side of the screen. You can see in the middle, if you're familiar with learning engineering, that little flower or tree shape is very common. And what I talked about in my last presentation was the fact that core ADDIE model, which you can see from CFITES there in almost the middle of the screen, that remains pertinent. There's a whole bunch of other things we have to do in this world of modern training that just ADDIE doesn't address. And some of those things are at the top of the screen, making sure you've got your leadership processes, your core processes, and your support functions all sorted out. ADDIE fits into that, but ADDIE doesn't tell you how you're going to support training technologies, for example. And then if you go to the right, that's the learning engineering process model. I said we can use that model along with CFITES, along with ADDIE. And then at the bottom of the screen, you see an org chart with a bunch of colors. I'll get into that now. I know I'm going pretty fast, but this is just a recap. Last meeting, I recapped what the traditional team looks like. This should look very familiar to some of you who are working in kind of military schools or naval schools. We tend to see a few ISDs kind of hived off to the side. We see a lot of CAF folks in uniform employed as instructors. We might see some CFTO temporary instructors employed. We see a bit of CAF QA. And you might have a bit of contracted expertise. From time to time, that varies. You might have long-term contracts or service contracts you're relying on. You might have contracted instructional roles to Calian or others like that, things like that. And what I said at the last meeting was, well, that's not really what your learning engineering team should look like. And I don't think that's what a school should look like. Now we're into that part about my opinion. So, and I'll tell you how I formed that opinion throughout this presentation. But my team right now, and this is, very likely similar to some of the other industry folks on the call. You tend to have maybe some technology and programming experts. You've got a few ISDs spread throughout. You have a lot of subject matter experts. You will have data analysts. You'll have some contracted expertise, project managers, program managers, so on and so forth. And I'm going to talk about all those folks. So again, problem space, one other element of the problem space is that in modern training programs, a lot of the ones that are being contracted out from ADM MAT, a lot of highly technical ones, definitely on the large ship programs and large aircraft. And I suggest large vehicle programs, you're going to have technical standards as well as learning standards. You're going to have quality standards that require you to be way better than we used to be in industry. So people aren't interested in getting, the lowest cost garbage anymore. They want the lowest cost of the best outcome, and they want it to be correct the first time, every time. And they also want you to prove it. So in training programs before, it used to be, hey, just give us some QSPs or some QSs, TPs, whatever, and some content. And now and I can speak, with experience in river class. There's a plethora of validation verification type documents that we have to supply at the end of the program to prove that we've done our work. So again, before we get to the real meat of the presentation, that slide I had up before. I want to go over it again. So the work that we do is another part of the problem space. And what I'm asserting is that, the work that we used to do, which is basically curriculum, maybe some courseware in class, maybe some online stuff, and a few trainers, that model is gone. We have to design instruction for experiences. We have to instrument instruction, collect data, and use that data. We have to produce software and hardware, systems of systems, and we need to support this through life. And so what I've suggested is that you have the work involves a lot of processes and procedures and standards and disciplines like systems engineering, human systems engineering, computer engineering, and integrated logistics support that heretofore we probably were supposed to be doing that or should have been paying more attention, but didn't. And this is where learning engineering comes in, kind of that multidiscipline team moving forward. So the ISD developer SME model is dead. I said this in the summary, and this was, I guess it's a bit of a soapbox I have. I do think it's a trap, like Admiral Akbar there. It's a trap because it was a good model 20 years ago. It was a good model 15 years ago when the emphasis was on classroom production or courseware production. And you can generally produce some pretty good kind of level 2, maybe level 3 ISI if you have an instructional systems designer developer who's actually in the system and generally a subject matter expert on the side. And that kind of triumvirate or triangle of expertise was very good at that. But none of these people, almost none of them, in some cases you will find that none of them understand ILS engineering. None of them tend to be HR professionals. You might get a TDO that's worked in the CMP world. You might get a SME that happens to be an engineer or maybe a technician of high standing that really gets that stuff. And almost none of the time are any of these people policy experts, referring to things like bilingualism policy. You might have a TDO or someone in your school that's very good with the learning difficulty policy. I can't remember what the CAF calls it now. But there are a whole bunch of other policies like naval material assurance and things. So what I'm suggesting here is that almost none of the time does those three people have all those expertise. I'm also suggesting that not one person on that team can be the pitcher, the quarterback, really what have you. But not everyone can be like the lead. You have to be a team of people. Not all learning experts, for example, want to mess around with data. We work in an incredibly data-rich environment right now, and it is getting more data-rich. You might find somebody on your team that really likes to mess around with data, but chances are that at your school, and somebody in uniform is just posted in. They may or may not. It's hit or miss. Not all programmers, not all your data experts, not all your technical folks want to talk about learning psychology. And I know most of us in the learning world out there have probably had that situation where we've kind of gone down a rabbit hole a little too far, talking about the nerd aspects of learning, which we find really, really compelling. And after talking for a few minutes, you've got three people staring you at the face, like, what is this person talking about? So, and if you haven't had that experience yet, well, in our world, you probably have it eventually. And not all project managers want to be a learning expert. So almost no one can do all things. And in this day and age of online and the forces spread across the country, it's very hard to gather people in one place to do those traditional boards and things like that. Ultimately, I'm suggesting that this model is dead. So based on that premise, I am moving forward. So the next few slides are where things get more conversational. Again, if you want to speak up or have a comment, then certainly do comment. I'm going to use a format here that talks about current state or problem, and then I move on to talk about some of my observations, I'm going to talk about a solution or a change that I may or may not have implemented, and then some adjustments after that. And I've kind of overwritten at the bottom. This is just basically based on Boyd's OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, and act, or any process of that nature. You can look it up yourself online. Just Google OODA. So this is just a sample. I have a series of 2 slides. They are partner slides. One has 4 squares. The other one tends to have 2 squares or 3 squares or rectangles. I'll start with a description of the problem state, number 1. I'll move on to number 2, the observation. I'll then go down to what I did in response to that, and then what I settled on afterwards. And then the next slide, I'm going to leave that current solution on the screen so you can refer to that. And then I'm going to go on to step number 5, where I'm going to make some recommendations or add some points of discussion that you folks on the CAF or D&D side of the world can consider. And they tend to go through kind of school level or more tactical recommendations to headquarters recommendations to those things that could be centrally provided, maybe by by folks at CDA or other bodies like that. So to start with, I'm going to talk about standards and technical specs. And I mentioned this at both my presentations. I mentioned it earlier on. We are in a situation, particularly us on the industry side, when we compete for and accept a project and want to deliver against that project, there are a plethora of standards and technical specs we must meet. On the learning side, just those learning standards or learning specs like CFITES, maybe S6000T that's maturing but not quite there yet. I find in the naval world, at least in river class, we're looking at JSP 822 to handle the collective training or team training side of analysis because CFITES just simply doesn't cover it. And I will fight you on that. If you want to have a fight with me about what CFITES can and can't do, I'll definitely have another conversation with you at any given time. We have things like DLN 3.0 guide, DLN 2.0 guide for the older version that's used in a secret setting. Virtual ships, we have the IEEE body icicle that is trying to pump out IEEE standards, S1000, S series standards, cybersecurity standards. Canada's new cybersecurity risk management framework is massive and complex. We have project management standards, naval material standards, and this is typically well beyond the capabilities of a standard team. Not one person can do it. It's better to rely on true experts. And I'm moving over to the observational rectangle, if you will. You can develop this expertise in-house if you have a lot of resources. In industry, we can hire in very quickly some of those resources, or we can subcontract some of those resources. So an example of that would be cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is big and complex, and there are companies that do it really well. So it's easier for us to subcontract rather than to build that expertise in-house. And if you don't want to pay, what you don't want to do is another observation that I made when I was growing my team is I don't want to pay to bring on expertise, to hire that expertise, and then not use it for periods of time, because that's just wasted money. And on my side of this fence, on my side of this conversation between government and industry, I can't have someone not doing something. I can't pay for them. So if it's not billable hours, I don't want that resource on my team. I want it subcontracted. So my adjustment was I went through a long period of identifying who does this stuff. I found out that in Fleetway on our team, we actually had folks who were technical publications experts. In another company, there was cybersecurity expertise. And then through some existing contracts, we had some foreign or UK experience in JSP 822. And I should make a shout out to folks like Regan Lagasse who were on the call. CAE is there, Lockheed Martin is there, other defense companies in Canada that are able to bring that expertise into through cooperation. I also found that on my team, because of the frequency, we were going to have to use XAPI and other data instrumentation, data capture, data management tasks. I would have to build that team in-house. So what I ended up with on the bottom right side is a team. On my team, I've got folks that know the learning standards, the data standards, and can do project management. I'm going to treat project management in a few slides as a separate topic, but I did create that on team. So I use that all the time. some of the time, I have to access folks, technical publication standards and manage other projects. And those were found throughout Fleetway, but not on my team. And other things that I've mentioned before, cybersecurity, I found that expertise elsewhere. It was very easy for me to do that. So this is kind of like a good case. There have not so far, knock on wood, been any real problems with this. But the interesting thing about me doing this is I'm now looking back at my career in uniform, and I realize that a lot of these things didn't exist in the way that I'm using them now. It's not to say that some folks don't understand some of this stuff, because there are all kinds of folks around too who understand this stuff. I think I saw Laura Brackenbury on the call, so a lot of the technical knowledge comes from her, things like that. But what I would say is, if I had it to do all over again, if I could design kind of a support structure for standards and technical specs in the CAS training world at the school level, I would generate more knowledge of those learning standards, non-CFITES learning standards. I'm going to make sure that I point that out. Things like DSP 2.2, Saddle, and other complementary nation standards or allied nation standards. I would seriously put a push on data standards for learning, XAPI. Although you may or may not be doing anything with online learning or learner record stores, or you might be using SCORM right now. If you're not seriously investing time and money into getting your staff skills and knowledge base in XAPI, you need to do that now. And then I would have actually built more project management in my schools. I think back to my time at Tenet TTS out in Cold Lake, when we had a lot of projects going on, and we were managing projects, but we weren't managing projects in the way that I'll talk about in a few slides. At those technical schools, like Tenet TTS years ago, giving folks really, really in-depth understanding how technical publication standards are organized. And at the time, we didn't have it, but S1000, getting understanding built about those data models is really important. And then at HQs and above, supporting folks with the really big and complex things. Not every school in the CAF, Army, Air Force, SOF, whatever, needs to have cybersecurity experts. Those experts exist at various bases, but from a learning sense, at a learning technology sense, that expertise really shouldn't reside at the HQ or above level. So moving on, if there's no questions, I don't see any hands. Nothing's coming up in the meeting chat, so that's good. Data. So I mentioned data a number of times in this presentation. And when I first arrived, and even now at Fleetway, we are realizing that more and more and more we are dealing with absolutely massive amounts of data today, even before we're delivering training on Ripper class. Some of that data that we use, we have to use information from the CAF to do our CAF generated solutions. Some of that data is chief military personnel, some is DMLC, occupation, people-related data. Some of it sits at the RCN in terms of RCN occupation plans for future occupations and crewing structures for ships, things like that. Some of it, who knows where it sits. Being on the industry side of this equation is very interesting, because sometimes you actually put a technical information request out to your customer, and they themselves don't often know where to get that information. So it's spread throughout the CAF. But when it comes to us delivering something on our side, we have to put that in one place, because we can't keep asking for it piecemeal. We need to aggregate it, and then we need to configuration manage it. So that's one problem with data. And the other problem with data is at the other end, which is the learning data. When you start to capture this stuff, what are you going to do with it? So I have noticed from my former uniform life and now that instructional systems designers and SMEs can shy away from data problems. A lot of times, if you're in an operational school and you're teaching people how to fight, some of those people really aren't interested in the ones and zeros and data that backs up stuff. Data systems require a programmer. Okay, so it's not simply about just gathering data and storing it somewhere. You're probably going to need people, and we do have people that can do some programming, even some basic programming inside databases, things like that. Data thinking requires skill, knowledge, and attitude more related to engineering than to the learning disciplines. And data requires complex relational databases. So those are my observations from the current state. And moving on to the adjustment, we've tackled this in two ways, with people and with tools. People, we started off couple of years ago, hired one data analyst. It was a shot in the dark. It was like, okay, let's get one of these people on board and see what they can do. And she since left the company onto bigger and better things. But the success of that person, Carla Shaw, joining the team grew into 3 additional data analysts on our crewing team and 1 data analyst on our training solutions team. So let's get down to that. I can't restate that more emphatically. On my training team, which is traditionally ISCs, developers, and SMEs, I have a data analyst, and I will probably bring on more because of the success and their ability to just understand and manipulate, store, manage data for use in the training world. And the tools that folks are using is SQL Server. You need a complex database. Excel will not do this. Access, I think, is the other kind of off-the-shelf database. You will break it. We broke Excel and Access a number of times before we moved on to SQL. You also need a SQL front-end design so that you can make it workable for others. Your average SME interacting with data probably doesn't want to get deep into the database, so you need to build a front end to have them interact with that. Our current solution, data analysts are part of our core team, and we're growing them. We will not ever do any project without them. I am competing to support other companies in some maritime projects that will go unnamed, and we will eventually compete for things like the Corvette Kingston class replacement, things like that. We will not ever do a training project without data analysts again. We're generating additional business because of the capability they bring, which is interesting. We're generating additional business within our family of companies and outside of that because people can see what we do now. They bring structure to chaos, and they're the link between mass data outputs and standards. And what I've included, before I get into that, top right, just want to bring this to your attention. I've just spent a lot of time talking about data and systems. Data does not have to be on the screen. So if you're managing your data properly, you are then able to extract that data and maybe put it on cards and do tabletop exercises with your customer to prove things. So what you see in that top corner is one of our tabletop exercises for our crew model generation for the River class destroyer. So get that data on paper, color code it. You can see these little figures that we have represent each crew member, and then you can move crew members around to do different tasks physically, get the Navy involved in designing their own crew. The only reason we could do that is because we first handled the data properly in the first place. Go ahead, Chris.
Just a comment, or just looking at the learner data, do SMEs or data analysts determine what is captured? It was mentioned in the chat, sir.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, good question. The determination of what is captured. So on River class, that is a determination that will be made between our recommendations and Canada's approval of those recommendations. Typically, if you're using a model like XAPI, you're going to use something like SCORM in its most basic form, which is called CMI5. It's kind of like my language is just escaping me here. The learner profile, competency profile, that basically means you're capturing data like SCORM would capture data. So that determination should be done on the Navy side between the school level and the HQ, and the HQ with CMP to make sure that everyone is aligned on what we're capturing on each person, making sure that you understand this is, in some cases, protected the information. Generally, SMEs are not determining what data is captured. Generally, rely on our SMEs for the technical or operational inputs. Data analysts generally aren't determining what is captured, but our data analysts will help build things like the competency profiles if you're getting beyond CMI5, and work on that with the customer. Chris?
Yeah, quick question, Brad. How does this relate to what we used to do in occupational analysis? It looks to me rather a lot like the same sort of process we used when we were using CODAP. back in the 90s when I was doing that.
So just before you answer that, Brad, Chris, can you say that louder? You're very faint and not everyone can hear your question.
Okay, no problem. I'll lean in. The computer I have is a budget one and the mic's not very good. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So my question, Brad, was in looking at the image and listening to your really quite nice explanation, I'm going back in time a little bit to when I was doing occupational analysis work back in the dark ages. That would have been the 90s when we were using CODAP. Your process sounds very much like what we were doing in terms of the classification exercise, taking the tasks, knowledges, and skills, and attaching them to where people were functionally operating, doing the job. So we were isolating for position one, what position one did. And in a sense, because we had the SMEs in the room as well, how they related to everybody in the space around them, whether that was their workspace in the naval setting, whether they were in a combat room, an engineering space, or what have you, and then knocking out the details on that so we knew what training might look like. Am I fairly accurate or am I wet?
No, I think you're close. What you're talking about is a really good example of kind of a part of what we do. But if I relate it to kind of this data problem that faces right now, we are dealing with similar data, doing similar analysis, but also a heck of a lot more data. So, generally in contracts nowadays, folks are asking you to have everything traceable to everything else. So the fact that you might, at the end of your training scheme, assign a lesson on some e-learning to a particular occupation has to be completely traceable all the way back through all the decisions you've made, all the way through back to either a system requirement document, a mission set for the ship, or some sort of technical data. And they're demanding this level of rigor, which is, in my opinion, entirely appropriate. They should be demanding this level of rigor. You should be able to trace all of your data to and from your decisions. And I think the only difference between what you're saying and what I'm saying is that in this modern age, with even more data, you need complex systems and people who understand those complex systems to ensure that you're maintaining that data and you can always have that traceability. I think that's the only difference.
Okay, thank you, Brad. And it's interesting because both you in your corporate world and in your previous naval world were dealing with human life and very expensive things and very, very important decisions. Where I am right now, I deal with human life in a different way because we're sending people out with the legal right to use lethal force under prescribed circumstances. And we're actually going through a very similar exercise, but we're doing it on a budget, if you will. I don't have a data analyst. I find what you're doing fascinating, and I definitely want to know more about this because I think it definitely applies here. Thanks very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And contact me at any time to talk further about this. So just to get through this section, school level, what I'm asserting here is that your data analysts are that link between data, outputs, and standards and people. You need them at the school level. They can reside at the HQ or centrally provided as kind of a hub to assist things, but your data analysts, those people who understand numbers, need to be in the room with you like they are in this picture. They need to be at the point where you're visualizing that, interacting with your customer, and they also need to be behind the computer screen, typing away and make sure that stuff is accurate. You need to have instant access to those folks, not at arm's length. So I see Mark Russell. Hi, Mark. Data is a black box, hence I'm curious, what is the data the analyst is looking at? Does it relate in any way to team or collective effect? Absolutely, it does. So let me give you an example. I don't have a slide for this, but so for example, if you attack data from the perspective of a piece of equipment, let's say a pump, if you look at it, you can look at data from different ways. So if you look at data from the pump piece of equipment, you're going to get all those kind of maintenance tasks associated with that data. You're going to get some technical parameters. Maybe you'll get reliability center maintenance data saying how often you're going to maintain this thing. And then you're going to assign people to do that. But then if you look at that same data, not from the equipment level, but from the system of systems level, many pieces of equipment may be working through an integrated platform management system, you're going to see how that piece of equipment relates to an operator task. So if an operator is maintaining an engineering plant, they're going to do certain things with that pump in normal or adverse conditions to maybe to clean it remotely or operate it a different way. And then there's another lens you can look through, which is the mission lens, right? Or that collective lens of perhaps, let me think, kind of on a ship at action stations, you're going to have your engineering plant configured in a certain way to ensure that if there's some damage that happens, there are other systems that can take over. And that might require the team to operate in a certain way. So I think, yes, it relates to all of those things. And those are all the pieces of information that I have found the need to manage and store centrally in a relational database so that we can look at things through all those different lenses and understand what information pertains. And if later on I go to change that piece of equipment from the A model to the B model, and the local control panel has changed, and if that's changed, maybe the interaction with that local control panel has changed, all that trickles through in an automated fashion in a complex database. And my data analysts have built it that way to do that. Hopefully that answers your question, Mark. Okay. I see Chris's question there too, but I don't think that's a question for me. It's more rhetorical. So moving on. I put this in the slide deck. This is for anyone who's still wondering what the hell I'm talking about. These are some, this language is available through some former job openings we had. It's not a job opening. What I put this here for is for you folks to understand what a data analyst is and what tasks we have been doing. So if you're a lone TDO at a school, maybe you're an instructor who's listening in at a school and you're saying, what's he talking about? Well, these are the things that a data analyst does. Okay. And that will be there in the presentation that you get after this presentation is over. So I've gone through different kinds of people so far, a bit of tool stuff, a bit of data analyst stuff, so the human side. I'm going to get more into the tool side of things. Tools to help you ADDIE. So, the core of a lot of what folks do, analysis, design, development, so on and so forth, requires tools. There's some products out there. Our current state at the time before making decisions is we realized there was a mass of that basic training data, skill, knowledge, task type of data that we were going to have to collect to eventually train a few thousand people. And we needed a system in which to put this. You needed traceability. I mentioned that in the last part of the presentation. You needed to configure, manage this, and Excel and Word doesn't cut it. Some of you at some schools are still using Excel and Word, and I would recommend you don't do that anymore because it's not capable and it's time consuming. Managing data was difficult. No one tool is fully capable of doing all the things you're going to want to be able to do. Kind of just use that ADDIE core model. There are some tools out there that do some of it very well. You can look at B&H Advisor, Aquila Alarms, or Aquila Alarms, as they say. Some products by EduWorks, and there's a number of other ones. Some companies are making bespoke tools that are very good, that are only available through those particular companies, but they're still very good. And then there's also tools that are provided by the CAF. So let me get through the adjustment part before I talk about that. We at the time chose to bring on B&H Advisor. So that's one of the tools that we have a relationship with right now. It requires ISD and SME training. And what we realized on implementation was that one SME there's one person on our team that really took to this. And if I had designed it from the start, I would have assigned that role to that person anyway. So if you're going to do something like this, you really do have to have someone at the school level who is really intimately familiar with these tools. Using these tools is an investment in time and money. none of these tools, I don't care if it's Aquila or B&H or anything else, none of these tools are just like something you're going to catch on to without a bit of training. It's quite frankly, folks, just like driving a car. You learn how to drive a car when you were 16 or however it was, 15, 16, 17 in your particular province. And at the time, there was probably some concepts that took a little getting used to, and you hugged the curb and things like that. But now you probably get in your car, drive to work, you don't think about it, right? And it's kind of the same way with these tools, right? There is a learning curve. Nothing we use, last point, bottom left, nothing we use links into CAF systems, and this would have been a clear benefit. I will be honest with you, and this is again a personal opinion. Attempts were made to work with folks to see if we could get the CAF system to do our work. You can't do that. The CAF is not in the business of selling its software to industry, and it became a hill too big to climb, which is totally fine. I'm not complaining about anybody on this call. A lot of people put a lot of hard work into this. It was never made a requirement for us on our side to use that system. Go ahead, Captain Ransom.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I just kind of put it in the chat. I noticed that just in the past slide, you mentioned data analysis and the importance of that. And particularly, I am not sure if you mean to say, I do agree we need more of that and more competency in that area. But the way to implement that across the trades is, I suppose that's the conceit of the presentation. I kind of put it in there. So is there an intent to implement these concepts through competency-based learning? Because really, I, in my opinion, I'll preface everything I say here with, in my opinion, it's pretty hard to assign those tasks. Those are hard to assign as pure tasks, right? Those are certainly a competency. There's a range of variation of how you can do that. And here we go. I actually think we somewhat have an issue in that area when we do hard assign that into tasks. We have in the TDL world. I've seen it in a lot of TPs and other trades where you have tasks that indicate that analysis is occurring, but really what's occurring is giving instructions on how to do that. And then what occurs is, well, whatever happens is happening. Is that good? Is that bad? Is it crickets? Well, regardless, that has now occurred. Task complete, checklist. So I think, I guess I don't want to ramble on too much here, but I think that
Sure.
that might be a bit of an issue where even again, we say conduct task-based analysis. That's actually in our own TDOOQ US.
Yeah.
But is it? It's actually, here is telling SMEs, this is how to do that.
Well,
Well,
so
okay, that's. Sorry, go on.
I don't want to sorry cut you off there, but it's an interesting point you make. And I'm just kind of making another point to this is that we tend to in our world spend a lot of time like performing things to lead to training. And what I'm saying is if you got your hand wrapped around the data properly, you can spend far less time performing things and spend a hell of a lot more time actually thinking about things. That may be the point you're getting to. I don't know, but feel free to reach out to me.
I don't know either, honestly.
Yeah.
It's
I
a
don't
deep
know.
conversation.
It's all right.
It's probably off the topic conversation, so I'll cut it there. Thanks a lot.
I had more time because I let you go on. I only have 15 more minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving along to the current solution, our current tool does not support the full spectrum that we want it to. Okay, there are some tools out there that are getting close. So Advisor is a great tool. It is complicated, but it is doing its job a hell of a lot better than any other tool could have at the time that we got it. There are tools like alarms that help you do scheduling, resource assignment. There's tools like the EduWorks tool, which I can't remember the title of, actually helps you link your LRS data back into your task analysis data. Now I just put Cadre there. I don't know what that is, but it's the EduWorks. Yes, awesome. Thank you. But I would say, if I could do this a lot better in the future, I would try to demand that projects link their work into the CAF system And I would try to find a way to take that CAP system and license it for use on particular projects by industry so that we're just using the CAP system. We don't have to use other systems. We could just use the CAP system if it was licensable. So that's a little thing out maybe to Bill or other people on the call. If you can figure out a licensing arrangement to use your system, then please do that. Moving on. So in Canada, again, you can look at the school level and HQ there. You need tools, you need to use them. HQs need to provide time and money to your schools to actually learn how to use these things. Hard lesson learned for Brad White. I tried to implement B&H Advisor a number of times in the Navy, and I think largely it failed. And I think largely it failed because we could never really dedicate enough time and money to train people on how to use it properly. I will own that myself. I don't think I did a good job there, but the job can be done, and I can tell you, just take my advice. If you're calling in from an HQ and you're thinking of implementing the CAF system or any other system, take your budget, double it, and take that other half and apply that to training up your teams on how to use these tools properly. And the blue thing at the top, the blue square, I mean, I don't know how much proof you need other than just take it from me. Your performance as an ISD senior developer in industry is diminished when you try to do your job on your own using your own tools. The same applies for you guys. Do not try to use your own tools. Use what's available to you. It may not be the best thing in the world, but use it because it works. Your school performance is diminished when your staff are using random tools and you're not supporting your staff to use common tools. So on that downer, let's get on to another one. I'm going to probably close on project and program management and then open it up for questions after a couple of conclusion slides. I'll skip over a few, but you'll have the slide presentation. Not speak highly enough about managing programs, which is many projects, or managing projects for scope, schedule, resources, and risk properly. It's very rare that in your training teams, schools, or even HQs, unless you're more on the engineering or technical side, you're going to have project management professionals, project managers. And when I joined this team a number of years ago, we had no PMPs. There was no schedule, really detailed schedule, apart from the main one. And risk was managed, I'll be honest, quite poorly. My observation, these are typically very separate disciplines in CAP schools. Your budgets tend to be managed by budget people, but your projects, your work tends to be managed by the same people who are actually developing and instructing training. And I believe that model needs to change. Typically, your ICs are trained, or TDOs are not trained in project management, except for a few of them who have specialized training if they've worked for Frady on Mac. But there are people who are trained in that. So let's use them. So the adjustment, the change, what I needed from PMs was schedule, creation, integration, and maintenance, which I have now, proper risk management, which I have now, and scope and resource management, which I have now. And the decision was to grow internal or hire external, and we've done both. We're growing PMPs inside the team, and we're going to hire a project coordinator to come into the team. So that one PMP right now that I have is in the training technology section with an option to hire more. And then we're going to have a project coordinator that works across kind of like in a matrix sense to manage schedule reporting and admin. Right now, I'm managing the schedule primarily myself, which is too much. Not much more to say on that. I know some questions are coming in here. Okay, I think that was answered by Megan. Project and program management. At the school level, identify the things you're going to use all the time. So if you're managing these projects, learning projects in divisions in schools or in sections in schools, or maybe in like a training development section, you need that project management skill all the time. You will use it all the time. Even if you don't have a project manager position, if you have someone who has PMP, who gets schedule, scope, resource, risk management, it is worth its weight in gold. Some of the time, if you're a smaller school, or maybe you don't have a lot of projects to manage, maybe you're just kind of you're well suited to the task at hand. I would suggest that at the HQ level, you could use for a specific amount of time a PMP. Centrally provided, going down to the bottom, if you're at a higher level headquarters, I would say that your project management could probably stick with things like lifecycle management, sustainment, things like that, more of like a EGM, EPM, or a trainer level kind of resource, rather than try to provide project managers to tactical level problems at schools. Don't do it. Let the schools do it. Interesting picture above there of all those people who are working on the crew, which will lead to obviously training solutions. There's only one instructional designer in that crowd. Okay, I'm not going to go through ILS. I want to leave time for questions and comments, but that is there for you. And I'm not going to talk about 3D models, other than the fact that if you're doing a technical project, if you are about to embark on anything that is for a technical school, CAD is king. You cannot possibly generate the kind of skill set inside the CAF that is required to do this job well, to convert CAD, GT, or STEP files into workable virtual maintenance trainers or operational trainers. Some folks have made attempts, and my hat is off to the folks at the Naval Learning Sports Center Training Sports Center in Halifax. But I want to point out that even they subcontract the large pieces of work. So don't do this. This is something that you want to subcontract. Again, I'm not trying to sell Fleetway on this, or other companies that do it really well. But that is something you need to consider. So the results of my little ramblings here are: the old system was ISDs, developers, and SMEs, when you tended to use contracted big old projects or development services. And the new model that I think every school should be moving towards, and I wish to hell I still worked at a naval school or something like that, and I could implement this myself. You need to adopt a learning engineering model where you have designers, developers, data analysts, SMEs. You've got supported by tools such as complex databases, ADDI support tools. You might identify and borrow integrated logistics support engineers. I didn't get into that. And you will probably need to rent or subcontract special teams. By special teams, that was the last point I made about 3D models and probably cybersecurity that I mentioned before, that you do not need to have that on your own. Make sure you're getting that from your higher headquarters, or you have your own subcontracts. Now, did I do it? I talked about the problem space. I recapped the last presentation, and I did my little thing with this process here. I'm not sure I talked about optimal workforce design, which is what I advertised. And I hope I touched on human-centered design and engineering methodologies and informed data-informed decision making. I do have some more slides on that, but I'm not going to get into that. I've got 6 minutes left, and I really do want to field some questions. Are there any questions out there? Just put up your hands, or Chris Stevens can help me out. Max.
Hey, hi, Brad. Thank you for the presentation. Very insightful, and I echo everything you say. And us as studios, we have a huge part to lean forward, learn the space, and try to help the organization evolve. So thank you for taking the time there. My question has to do with one of the comments you made earlier about standards for technical manuals. As you know very well, the training that students receive is largely repackaging of content that exists in various manuals, CFJPs, CFCDs, DODs, manuals we produce internally, manuals that come from industry. If we want to have that digital thread, if we want to make the most out of the learning and sharing concept, we need to do a better job. The CAF needs to do a better job at curating that corpus of knowledge that resides in our policy and doctrine manuals. As you also know, training authorities have limited authority in that space. The warfare centers own some of it, CMPs own some of it. It's very distributed. Any insights on how, as a CAF or arguably a department, we should tackle that one?
Holy mackerel, man! that is a huge question. Okay, so let's talk about this from a couple of angles. What I find that one of the biggest differences between industry and the CAF right now is the distance. Yeah, you like that, eh? The distance between capabilities, the distance between knowledge. So, like, there's that physical and a hierarchical and headquarters and organizational distance between the people in charge of the technology, the technical policies, the environmental policies, the people policies, and you folks at the school that have to put all this together. On the industry side, because we operate really, really lightly, right? We're light because we take in a lot of taxpayer money, and let's face it, we want to make the most money we can out of it. In big projects like River Class, your profits are just a percentage of it's a standard percentage, so you're not going to make more or less money. But you tend to operate really lightly, and as I mentioned before, you bring on people. If you're not using people, you can't have them on overhead. So you're like really, really tight. So what that does, and I don't know if this is the reason why it does it just does it. You're really close. So I am literally 20 feet away, not my house, but at work. I'm 20 feet away from the people who are in charge of the tech clubs. I'm a phone call away from the cybersecurity folks, and it's very quick. So we can't alter policy, but we can understand what we're dealing with a lot better. When it comes to your problem or your problem space, not Max's problem, but the distance problem, is that, yeah, standards. So a bunch of people say S1000. Yeah, standards are one way to do it. So if there's one data model for technical standards, S1000, then that becomes the core of what you're dealing with. Don't forget, though, S1000 is not like a pure scientific system. When something is put into S1000, there's actually a human quality check on that to make sure it makes sense, right? So, but when it comes to other policy and doctrine, like operational policy and doctrine, I don't have an answer for you. I don't, because the folks at the warfare centers, depending on which one you're talking with, are very close because they're driven by the security classification of the material rather than. So I think on the technical side, you can probably get much closer. I think DGM EPM, they're willing to play ball. They're really making advances in S1000, but on the operational side, I don't know. I'd love to talk to you more about it. I just don't know.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but we are down to your last minute, and my boss has a question or a comment. Can we call on him really, really quickly?
Sure.
Hey, Brad,
go ahead.
I really want to thank you for doing this presentation. Obviously, you highlighted the importance of learning engineering and the importance of design up front. Really curious in terms of how Fleetway are using AI tools on both the design, content generation, and analytical analysis side.
Oh, sorry, how is Fleetway? Just one more time, just repeat it, please.
How is Fleetway using AI tools on the design, content generation, and analytical analysis?
Okay. Contractually, we are not allowed to use artificial intelligence on River-class destroyer work, so we're not. Okay. Non-contractually, so on other work that is not related to River-class destroyer in any way, shape, or form, and is also not related to HC-DAG. So on other future projects and other R&D we're doing, we are working with a couple of partners on two AI things. One of those AI things is turning information into formatted training outputs. So things like doing task analysis, doing a structural analysis, things like that. So kind of like your basic ADDI type of processes. The other way that we're looking into AI is high level, highly sensitive decision making aids. So, one example of that could be, I'm not saying it is, but it could be if you have a crew model and you are about to sail a ship in a task group with certain skills and capabilities for a certain mission set, how can you make decisions about that crew model on the fly rapidly with information that would allow a captain or a task group commander to alter that crew model? So that's kind of the high level decision making. Those are two areas we're working with AI. But again, we are not doing anything with AI on River class right now.
Thank you, Brad. I know we have to get you off and get you to your next meeting, so I want to thank you as well for coming, doing a great presentation. We could probably continue this conversation for another hour.
Yeah.
Just the last couple of points. So thank you so much. And if you have anything last minute that you'd like to share with us, and then I will say goodbye to everybody else.
No, it's my pleasure. If anyone who knows me, once you get me talking, I won't stop. Love the soapbox. I appreciate everyone's time. Hopefully, this is interesting for folks. If you want to look at those charts I made, email me, arrange another session. I can come back. Or I noticed that a bunch of people on the text here from industry, Vicky, Megan, a bunch of others have had some comments. Like, please reach out to those people too, because we are here to have a professional discourse outside of contracts as well. We want to have that professional discourse because it helps the CAF and it helps you folks stay operationally focused. Okay, so please reach out. Thank you very much for your time.
Hey, thanks, Brad. That was really well said. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. And we have a couple of quick reminders from C-ADL. Brad, if you want to log off, go ahead. We have to go around. So from C-ADL, we're now accepting project requests. So we've sent out a call out letter from the PMIO. There are links in there for your applications and just see how we can support you with technology enabled learning. And secondly, the final learning engineering speaker will be on February 19th. So we hope to see you all there. Brad has kindly left contacts in the chat if you'd like to get in touch with him. We will publish both the entire presentation and we will publish his a PDF of Brad's presentations so that everyone has access to it after this discussion is done. So again, thank you so much for being here, and hopefully we'll see everybody next month. Thank you so much.